In the end, when everything else fades away, only the lessons remain. Watch our cinematic reflections on life, love, loss, and the beauty of starting over again. Hit subscribe now to join us on this beautiful journey of reflection. The phone was still in my hand when the anesthesia started pulling me under. I remember thinking, he'll be here when I wake up. That was the last thought I had before the lights went white and then went nowhere. His name was Daniel. We'd been married for 6 years. 6 years of dinners I cooked and flights he took and explanations I accepted without asking twice. I was good at not asking twice. My mother raised me that way. Don't make a fuss, Elena. Don't be difficult. So I wasn't. I smoothed things over so often I didn't even notice my hands were getting tired. The pain had started 3 days before. A dull pressure behind my sternum, radiating into my jaw, my left shoulder. I'd mentioned it to my husband on Tuesday morning while he was knotting his tie in the mirror. He glanced at me through the reflection. "You're probably stressed," he said. "You've been overdoing it with the gym." I nodded. That made sense. I'd been overdoing it. By Wednesday night I could barely lift my left arm. I sat on the edge of the bathtub at 2 in the morning, breathing slowly, telling myself it was nothing. My husband was asleep 6 feet away. I thought about waking him. I picked up my phone and put it back down 4 times. Don't make a fuss. Thursday morning I called my doctor from my car in the parking garage at work. She told me to go to the emergency room immediately. Not urgent care. Not tomorrow. Now, Elena. What you're describing is not stress. I texted my husband from the hospital parking lot. At Mercy General. Doctor thinks something is wrong with my heart. Going into the ER. He replied in 4 minutes. Faster than usual. What? Which doctor told you that? You should have called Dr. Morris first. He knows your history. Don't let them run a bunch of tests before we talk. I stared at the message for a long time. The pressure in my chest had spread up into my throat. Coming? I typed back. I'm in the middle of the Henderson account. This is the worst possible timing, Elena. Keep me posted. Keep me posted. I was walking into a cardiac emergency room and he wanted updates like I was a project status report. I checked in alone. I sat in the blue plastic chair alone. When the triage nurse asked if there was someone they could call, I looked at my phone and said, "He's on his way." Because I believed it. Even then, I believed it. They moved me fast once they saw the EKG. A young resident came in with that particular kind of calm that medical people use when they don't want to alarm you, and he said words I'd never heard applied to me before. Words like significant blockage and interventional cardiology, and we need to do this today. A woman from the cardiology team came in behind him, Dr. Renata Voss, 50s, silver hair pulled back. The kind of face that had delivered news like this, Ukide NE7, das. The kind of face that had delivered news like this 10,000 times and still managed to look like she meant it personally. "Is your husband here?" she asked. "He's coming," I said. She looked at me in a way I didn't understand until much later. They let me keep my phone while they prepped me. I called my husband. Voicemail. I called again. He picked up on the 4th ring, irritated. "Elena. I'm literally. They're saying I need surgery," I said. "Heart surgery. Today. Right now." Silence. "What kind of surgery?" "A catheterization. Maybe a stent." Dr. Voss said. Okay. Let me I have to finish this call with Henderson. An hour, maybe 90 minutes. I'll head over after. They're prepping me now," I said. "Daniel. It's a routine procedure, Elena. You're at a good hospital. You'll be fine. I'll be there." He wasn't there. I signed my own consent forms. A nurse named Patricia held my hand while I did it, which is the kind of thing you don't forget. She had reading glasses pushed up on her head and a coffee stain on her scrub pocket, and she held my hand like she'd done it 1,000 times and it still mattered. "You've got good veins," she told me, which made me laugh despite everything, and I think she said it on purpose. I went into the operating room at 2:17 inches the afternoon. I know the exact time because I looked at the clock on the wall and memorized it, the way you memorize things when you're afraid they might be the last things you see. He wasn't there. I don't know how long the procedure took. When I came back to myself, I was in a recovery bay, pale curtains on 3 sides, machines beeping softly, late afternoon light coming through a window I couldn't quite see. My chest felt strange, not painful exactly, more like the memory of pain. Like something had been resolved. Dr. Voss was standing at the foot of my bed. "Welcome back," she said. "It went well. You had a significant arterial blockage, 90% occlusion in the LAD. If you'd waited another day, maybe two, we'd be having a very different conversation." I absorbed that slowly. 90%. One more day. "Is my husband here?" I asked. Something moved across her face. Not quite pity. Something more careful than that. "There's a woman waiting for you," she said. "She's not family. She said she's a colleague. But she asked me to give you something before I let her in." She reached into the pocket of her white coat and set an envelope on the blanket beside my hand. Cream-colored. My name written on the front in handwriting I didn't recognize. She was very specific about the timing. She said I should give it to you privately, before anyone else came in. I looked at the envelope. I looked at Dr. Voss. "She said you'd understand once you read it," the doctor added. I picked it up. The flap wasn't sealed, just tucked in. My hands were still a little clumsy from the sedation. I worked it open slowly. Inside was a single folded piece of paper, and tucked behind it, a smaller card from Mercy General's billing department. I looked at the billing card first. Account balance, $0. Payment received in full. I read that line 3 times. Then I unfolded the letter. "Elena. You don't know me. But I know your husband. I've been where you are right now, in a hospital bed, waiting for someone who was never going to come. I know how that feels, and I know what comes after if you let it. I paid your bill because I could, and because no one helped me, and I've never stopped wishing someone had. There's a woman waiting outside who wants to talk to you. Her name is Melissa. She works in your husband's office. Please listen to what she has to say. You deserve the full picture. M.W." I read it twice. Then I folded it back up and held it against my chest, on top of the place where they'd gone in, and I stared at the ceiling for a long time. Dr. Voss was still there. She hadn't left, I realized. She'd been watching me. "Can I tell you something?" she said. "Off the record, as a woman and not your physician?" I nodded. "In 15 years of cardiology, I've seen a lot of people come through emergency procedures. And there's a pattern." She paused, chose her words. "The patients who come in alone, specifically women who come in alone and keep apologizing for being alone, the way you did this morning, they almost always have the same look when they wake up and their person still isn't there. And it's not just sadness." She looked at me directly. "The chronic stress of that kind of relationship is not unrelated to what I found in your artery today. I'm not saying it caused it. I'm saying it doesn't help. And I'm saying you're 41 years old, Elena. You have a lot of heart left." She touched the rail of the bed once, lightly, and then she left. I lay there in the pale curtained bay and I thought about 90%. I thought about keep me posted. I thought about all the times I'd sat on the edge of the bathtub at 2 in the morning deciding not to make a fuss. "Can you send her in?" I called toward the curtain. The woman who came around the edge of it was maybe 35, dark hair, careful eyes. She was holding her purse with both hands the way people do when they're nervous and trying not to show it. She looked at me in the hospital bed and something in her face shifted relief, maybe, or resolve. "I'm Melissa," she said. "I work in client relations at Hartwell Group." "That's where your husband." "I know where he works," I said. She nodded. She sat down in the chair beside the bed without being invited, which told me she'd rehearsed this moment, had maybe needed the chair to be already there so she wouldn't lose her nerve. "Who is M.W.?" I asked. I was still holding the letter. Melissa took a slow breath. "Her name is Margaret Whitfield. She used to work at Hartwell. About 4 years ago." She paused. "She was married to your husband before you were." The machines beeped. Somewhere behind the curtain a phone rang and went to voicemail. "He told me he'd never been married," I said. "I know," Melissa said. "He told her the same thing about the woman before her." I closed my eyes. I opened them. "How many?" "Margaret was the second. You're the third." I thought about the house we lived in. The house my husband had owned before I met him, that he'd bought, he said, as an investment property before we got together. He'd shown me photos from before his renovations, proud of the upgrades he'd made. New floors. New kitchen. Everything stripped and replaced. "Where is Margaret now?" I asked. "Portland," Melissa said. She moved there after things ended. She kept tabs on him, though. Through me. We've been friends since she worked at Hartwell. She hesitated. When I saw the name on your husband's calendar this week, Elena's procedure, Mercy General, 2 p.m., and then watched him go to lunch with a client instead, I called Margaret. She caught a flight this morning. She paid my hospital bill from the airport? She'd been holding money in a separate account for 2 years, Melissa said quietly. In case she ever found the next one. In case she got there in time. I looked down at the letter again. I've been where you are right now. I know how that feels. What happened to her? I asked. To Margaret. Melissa's hands tightened on her purse. She had a pulmonary embolism. 2 years into their marriage. She called him from the ambulance. She stopped. He came to the hospital eventually. About 6 hours later, he told her she'd scared him. Cried a little. And then spent the next 8 months convincing her she'd overreacted to the whole experience, that she was fragile, that she needed him to manage things because she couldn't trust her own judgment anymore. Don't make a fuss, Elena. Don't be difficult. How did it end? I asked. She found emails, Melissa said. He'd been with someone else the entire marriage. When she confronted him, he told her she was paranoid. That the medication from her embolism was affecting her perception. That she should increase her anxiety prescription. I thought about last Tuesday morning. You're probably stressed. You've been overdoing it. I thought about Wednesday night on the edge of the bathtub. I thought about calling my doctor from the car because I hadn't wanted to bother him at 7 a.m. I need to make a call, I said. I called my sister first. She arrived in 40 minutes, still in her work clothes, and when she walked around the curtain and saw me in that bed, she made a sound I hadn't heard her make since our father died. She sat on the edge of the mattress and held my face in both hands and looked at me like she was checking inventory. How long have you known something was wrong? She asked. Not about my heart. I'm not sure I did, I said. I think I just stopped checking. My husband arrived at 6:48 p.m. I know because my sister clocked it on her phone and showed me the screen without a word. He came in with that particular energy he had rushed, slightly breathless, performing urgency. He kissed my forehead before I could move. I came as fast as I could, he said. The Henderson thing was a disaster, you have no idea but you look good. You look fine. See? I told you it would be routine. He hadn't told me that. He told me to keep him posted. My sister was standing against the far wall with her arms crossed. He glanced at her, registered something in her expression, and looked back at me. What? He said. I've been here since 2, I said. I know. I'm sorry. It was. You had my surgery on your calendar, I said. Melissa from your office saw it. Something shifted behind his eyes. Quick, practiced, gone. Melissa? Why are you talking to people from my office? She came to see me, I said. So did someone else. He was quiet. Margaret Whitfield, I said. The name landed. I watched it land. He looked, for just a moment, like a man who'd walked into a room and found all the furniture rearranged. Elena. She paid my hospital bill, I said. From Portland. She bought a plane ticket and flew here and paid my hospital bill because she knew you wouldn't come, and she wanted to make sure that when I woke up, I wasn't alone and I wasn't indebted to you. She's unstable, he said. His voice was steady. He'd found his footing. She's been obsessed with me for years. Whatever she told you. She didn't tell me anything, I said. She left me a letter and sent in Melissa. Melissa doesn't know. You were married before me, I said. Twice. Silence. The machines beeped. That's not it's complicated, Elena. Those weren't real marriages, they were. I'm going to need you to leave, I said. You just had heart surgery. I know, I said. I was there. You weren't. He left. Not immediately. There was more. There was the explaining and the reframing and the voice that went soft and then went cold, but eventually he left. My sister walked him out. I heard their voices in the corridor, low, and then not so low. And then silence. I lay in the narrow bed in the blue curtained bay and I looked at the ceiling and I breathed. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The stent was sitting in my LAD artery doing the work that years of accumulated constriction had made necessary. I thought about what Dr. Voss had said. You're 41 years old. You have a lot of heart left. My sister came back and sat in the chair and didn't say anything for a while. "She's still here," she finally said. "Margaret. She's in the family waiting area downstairs." She didn't want to intrude, but she said. My sister glanced down at her phone. She said, "Tell her I'll stay as long as she needs." I thought about a woman I'd never met who had caught a flight that morning and paid a bill she didn't owe and waited in a family waiting room for a stranger, because someone had failed to do that for her, and she'd never forgiven the universe for it. "Can you bring her up?" I asked. Margaret was not what I'd imagined. She was small, mid-40s, dressed like she'd come straight from an office, which she had, Melissa told me later. She'd left a deposition mid-morning and gone straight to the airport in her work clothes. She had the particular self-possession of someone who had been through something that stripped everything unnecessary away. She sat in the chair my sister had vacated and she looked at me with an expression that was almost clinical. "You're okay," she said. It wasn't a question. "Apparently I had a 90% blockage," I said. "I had a clot the size of a golf ball," she said. "We're overachievers." I laughed. It hurt a little, in my chest. I laughed anyway. We talked for 2 hours. Melissa came up after visiting hours and the night nurse looked at the three of us, me in the bed, my sister in the corner chair, Margaret and Melissa side by side, and made a judgment call and didn't say anything. Sometimes people recognize when something necessary is happening. Margaret told me things I needed to hear and some things I wasn't ready for. She told me about the first wife, a woman named Carol who now lived in Tucson and had remarried and had 2 children and had, according to Margaret, fully rebuilt her life and wanted nothing more to do with any of it. She told me about the pattern, the charm at the beginning, the slow erosion of trust in your own perceptions, the medical events that always seemed to happen at the wrong time, the recovery periods during which you were isolated and dependent and unable to clearly see what you were dependent on. "Did you ever wonder," I said, "if he did it on purpose?" "The isolation, I mean. Not the medical stuff, but making you doubt yourself until you needed him to explain your own life to you?" "Every day," she said. And then a therapist explained coercive control to me and I stopped wondering and started just calling it what it was. Melissa had brought her laptop. She was a careful, methodical person. I was learning the kind of person who wrote things down and kept records without entirely knowing why, until the day the reason became clear. She had emails. Not hacked, not stolen, just the kind of thing that accumulates in a shared work environment when someone isn't as careful as they think they are. Client meeting notes that didn't match calendar entries. Expenses filed under categories that didn't add up. A pattern of behavior that, looked at cumulatively, told a story. "This isn't just about marriages," Melissa said quietly. "Some of what he's been doing at Hartwell is." She paused. "I've already talked to an attorney. There's a whistleblower process." I looked at the three of them. A woman who'd paid a stranger's hospital bill from 30,000 feet in the air. A woman who'd walked into a recovery room with a laptop and a conscience. My sister, who'd arrived in 40 minutes in work clothes and hadn't left. "What do I do now?" I asked. "Tonight," Margaret said, "you rest. You had heart surgery today. And tomorrow?" "Tomorrow," she said, "we start making sure he can't do this to anyone else." I was discharged 2 days later. My sister drove me to her house, not mine. I sat in her passenger seat with a folder of discharge instructions and a prescription for blood thinners and a phone with 17 unanswered texts from my husband, and I watched the city move past the window and thought about how different everything looked from this side of it. The attorney, my sister had found, specialized in marital asset cases. She was the kind of woman who took notes by hand in a leather notebook and asked the exact right questions and never looked surprised by anything, which I found deeply comforting. She reviewed what Melissa had gathered. She made calls I wasn't privy to. Within a week, she had a picture of our marital finances that was different in several significant ways from the picture I'd been given. My husband, it turned out, had been building a financial architecture for years, accounts I didn't know about, assets in names I didn't recognize, a shell company that held property in 2 states. He'd done the same thing with Margaret, to a lesser degree, before she found the emails, and he'd had to move faster than he'd planned. He was setting up his exit, my attorney said, not unkindly. He just hadn't gotten there yet. Carol, the first wife in Tucson, agreed to provide a deposition. She'd been waiting, she said, for someone to ask. She'd thought about reaching out for years but never knew if it would help or only reopen things she'd worked hard to close. When my attorney called her, she cried, and then she got very precise and professional. And her deposition was, according to my attorney, extraordinarily useful. Melissa filed her whistleblower report 3 weeks after my discharge. The partners at Hartwell Group, confronted with documentation they couldn't explain away, made decisions quickly. My husband was placed on leave within days. The financial investigation that followed was separate from my divorce proceedings but ran parallel to them in ways that simplified certain conversations. He called me twice from a number I didn't recognize. The second time, I answered. "You have no idea what you've done," he said. "I think I do," I said. "Everything I built. You built it on us," I said. "On women you hollowed out so you could fill the space with whatever you needed. That's not building something. That's just taking." He said other things. I stopped listening and ended the call and sat in my sister's kitchen with a cup of tea going cold and thought about 90%. About sitting on the edge of the bathtub at 2 in the morning. About a woman who'd caught a morning flight and waited in a vinyl chair in a family waiting room for someone she'd never met. Margaret and I talk on the phone now, usually Sunday evenings. She's back in Portland, back at her firm. She has a daughter who is 9 and who apparently made her a card that says "You are my favorite person" and which she's had laminated. She doesn't date, she says, but she's open to it. "I'm not closed," is how she put it. "I'm just not in a hurry." Melissa got a new job. Better title, better pay. She sent me a text on her first day that said only, "First day, no nonsense. Feels good." I sent back a heart emoji because it seemed right. Carol sent a handwritten note after the proceedings concluded. She'd written it on stationery with small blue flowers across the top, the kind of detail that tells you something about a person. She said she was glad we'd found each other. She said she hoped we were all okay. She said that for a long time she'd wondered if she'd done something to make it happen, to draw something like that into her life. And that therapy had been the long, slow work of understanding that people like him seek out people like her on purpose, that what he'd targeted in her wasn't weakness, it was openness. "The thing that made us vulnerable to him is the same thing that found each other," she wrote. "Hold on to that. I have a scar now, very small, where they went in. Below my collarbone on the left side. I forget about it most days and then I catch it in the mirror sometimes and I stand there for a moment and think about Dr. Voss saying you have a lot of heart left. I'm not healed. I want to be honest about that because I think stories like mine sometimes get told as if the resolution is the ending, and I don't think that's true. I still have moments in the middle of the night when I sit with some cold version of what if I'd waited one more day. Not just about the artery. About everything. But I also have this. I woke up alone in a recovery bay and a stranger had paid my bill and left me a letter, and because of that letter I am sitting here telling you this story. Because of that letter I know that the instinct to reach through to the next person, to say I was here and here is what I know, is one of the most human things there is. Margaret didn't know if I'd listen. She didn't know if I was ready, or if it was too late, or if I'd choose to believe him over her. She came anyway. I think about that when I feel like not making a fuss. I think about all the women who are sitting on the edge of their bathtubs at 2 in the morning deciding not to bother anyone. I think about what it would mean for one of them to get a letter, or a phone call, or just someone sitting in a vinyl chair in a waiting room who says, "I'll stay as long as you need." That's the thing about the masked connections between women, the ones that happen in hospital corridors, and through intermediaries, and across distances that shouldn't make them possible. They're not loud. They don't announce themselves. But they hold. I'm learning to let them.